So welcome everyone. My name is Andrew Andrusko and I work with the Minnesota Department of Transportation. In just a minute we'll be beginning our introductory outreach webinar with the Minnesota Weight Enforcement Investment Plan. I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today as we develop our efforts to plan for the future of Minnesota's commercial vehicle weight enforcement and safety programs. As I said, my name is Andrew Andrusko and I'm a transportation planner with the MnDOT Office of Freight and Commercial Vehicle Operations. I'm going to start off just by welcoming everybody and providing a brief overview of what we've worked on so far, where we're going in the future, and what we hope to learn as we develop the draft plan in the next steps. As a brief introduction to these areas, we have a presentation content that will hopefully explain to you all of the necessary content to provide an overview of the planning effort as well as who's involved and why weight enforcement is important. As we look at weight and safety enforcement in Minnesota, it's important to recognize that the Minnesota Department of Public Safety, working through the State Patrol Division, has statewide jurisdiction over safety, vehicle size, and weight enforcement. So the Minnesota Department of Public Safety is the primary enforcement body that has statewide jurisdiction. The Minnesota Department of Transportation owns and operates and maintains weigh station facilities and other equipment that is needed for weight and safety enforcement in Minnesota. So this particular effort is a partnership between MnDOT, the State Patrol, and the Minnesota Department of Public Safety. Without having the cooperation of all the entities involved, we would not be able to effectively coordinate our future planning investments. As we look to the future, one of the key important ingredients is public engagement in all of our efforts. And with respect to that, we need to look at our existing enforcement programs. The Minnesota, as a state government, has three primary enforcement programs. The first is the roadside inspection program that's carried out in coordination with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, or FMCSA guidelines. We also have a mandatory inspection program, which is an inspection of vehicles that transport hazardous materials or have a gross weight of over 26,000 pounds. Our school bus, self-propelled mobile equipment on a mounted or otherwise created vehicle chassis. As we think about that, the importance here is that the national federal motor carrier laws are developed to ensure the safety of the traveling public, as well as ensure that freight goods and movements are not impacting other operations and businesses. So enforcement programs have also been created through civil enforcement, which is a civil inspection program that is intended to provide a fee service for individual inspections at specific sites off of the trunk highway system. A bigger question perhaps you might have is, why do we do weight and safety enforcement? As we look at industry and commerce in Minnesota, we rely on the road network and that trunk highway system to transport our goods and services to markets. Over $1 billion of goods and services are transported in Minnesota via truck annually. Truck safety is important to all road users, as the future of safety of trucking in Minnesota impacts other users such as cars and motorcyclists. When we think about that, commercial vehicles impact the quality and condition of roads and bridges as well because of their extreme weight. As we look to ensure that these vehicles aren't impacting the roadway in a negative way, that means that we need to make sure that they're operating within their permitted guidelines and making sure that they're not overweight or oversized as they travel about the trunk highway system. It's important to make sure that those types of road users are being safe to maintain our infrastructure, such as bridges and pavements. You may have noticed that there are certain situations, such as the I-94 tunnel, where certain size vehicles are not able to operate. That's another instance where weight and safety enforcement is very important to the state, as well as the Minnesota Departments of Public Safety and the Department of Transportation. As we think about that, we need to look at what's happening in the future. And that's part of the reason why we're creating a weight enforcement investment plan today. We currently don't have a comprehensive investment plan for these areas. Our last strategic plan was adopted in the year 2005, and at that time we were focusing on improving compliance and building interagency coordination between the three government bodies that we discussed earlier: the Minnesota Department of Transportation, the Minnesota State Patrol, and the Minnesota Department of Public Safety. At that time, we also had a legislative mandate to look at how we could improve our weight and safety enforcement in the future. Right now, we're also creating a plan to understand what our future investment needs are to maintain our existing services and infrastructure. A majority of the weigh station sites and waste gales have recently been maintained, but were built in the 1980s and 70s. So there is a significant need that we're aware of, but we don't have specific quantification of what all those needs are and what the future costs are to maintain those sites. So developing a state plan in alignment with our MnSHIP, or Minnesota Highway Investment Plan guidance, is very important, because we need to maintain the public goods and safety throughout Minnesota and to ensure the well-being of all of the freight movement that occurs. So as we look at what the plan entails, we also needed to develop project goals. Part of that means that we needed to identify specific capital, operational, and maintenance needs statewide. What that entails: capital investments are physical infrastructure, so those would be your actual weigh stations and scales. Operational expenses or investments are the staffing, as well as the maintenance, which is the mowing, the trash, and making sure that the individual buildings are safe and maintained. The other portions of the project goals of this effort are to develop the actual plan and to provide recommendations for future technologies for future evaluation. As you know, the trucking industry is moving at light speed in terms of the types of technologies that are being discussed. Automated vehicles and future technologies, such as semi-automated vehicles, are being discussed throughout the nation as well as Minnesota. The Minnesota Department of Transportation recently developed an automated vehicles and infrastructure technology systems unit to investigate many of the future trucking industry changes. As part of this plan, we are looking to determine what specific technologies would be helpful using conventional technology, such as weigh in motion scales, weigh in motion sites, as well as other types of technology, such as digital portable scales or virtual weigh station sites. These are important because they help us understand how we might invest in the future. So what have we done so far? Our weight enforcement investment plan started out with the development of what we call a classification system study. You might be thinking, well, what is that? Why are we talking about a system study? Each of our assets are divided into systems throughout the transportation system. So if you think about each of the roads as a type of a system, we also need to think of weigh station scales as well as other infrastructure that supports weight enforcement as a type of system. What we did is we developed a classification, or a way to separate out what type of weigh station sites each of the existing sites are. So we could put them into classes A, B, C, D, and E, with class A being the largest and most fully developed sites, and E being the smallest or the least improved sites. Each of the classifications were based on specific data, such as how many truck counts we have, which is the HCADT. What that term means is heavy class annual daily traffic, as well as functional classification, which is a type of identifying how the road is used. We also used other types of key information, such as how we plan to use each of the sites, which was our concept of operations, as well as what, at a very high level, what the cost of each classification type might be, and what type of costs we would incur in the future at each of the weigh station sites. The other pieces of the classification project or subtask within the overall effort was to look at what our current staffing is and what types of maintenance roles and responsibilities we had between MnDOT and the State Patrol. As we developed this particular task, we realized that we needed to also develop evaluation criteria that would help us look at what all the needs are across the state. Which brings me to my next subject, which is the needs assessment. As part of the weight enforcement investment plan effort, we are developing a needs assessment report. Similar to how other systems within the state government work, needs assessments reports allow us to understand how much and where we need to invest in the future. We needed to develop specific types of information, such as geographic information, specific infrastructure information, enforcement information, roadway characteristics, and determine where all the different types of needs are located and where we should invest in the future. So this is sort of the big picture question of, well, what are the needs and where are they located? As we look at our existing infrastructure, we know, for example, that we have weigh station sites throughout the state of Minnesota at key locations, strategically located so that specific trucks and other types of vehicles would be inspected to ensure the safety and to ensure that the public was protected from oversized and overweight vehicles. As we look at that, we have weigh station locations at Erskine, Saginaw, Red River, Daytonport, St. Croix, and Worthington. Some of these locations are named after local landmarks. For example, the Daytonport is actually located in the city of Ramsey, but was noted as Daytonport because there used to be a port there. So as you look at this list, look at the map to the right and use that as a guide to where these specific sites are located. We also have temporary locations where mobile enforcement is performed by the State Patrol. These sites are considered a step down from weigh station sites and are not used during all times of the year. They're used for specific targeted enforcement to ensure that other vehicles are not avoiding our weigh stations intentionally, and they're located at Carlton, Minnesota, Forest Lake, Clarks Grove, and Nodine. We also use what are called weigh in motion technology sites located throughout the state of Minnesota. Those are individual monitoring equipment that are used to help us forecast traffic across the truck system as well as other types of traffic such as cars and other vehicles, buses, motorcycles, etc. Weigh in motion sites help us because they give us an idea on trends of where truck traffic is moving, as well as understanding if some of the truck traffic is actually overweight. As we do enforcement across the state, we may also use weigh in motion sites to help us understand where investments might be needed in the future. Currently, we use weigh in motion sites across the state to give us a calculated estimate of these features, and that was a specific piece of data that we collected as part of our initial needs assessment report work. To give an idea on what are some of the other data that we collected are, I've listed a wide variety of different other groups. We looked at the specific staffing counts as mentioned earlier, the maintenance costs through our Swift financial reporting software, our truck volume and travel patterns, again, taking key information from our specific corridors that we're looking at, looked at in existing enforcement facilities, which I mentioned previously, other operational input such as oversized overweight transportation routes or superload corridors, truck parking locations and resources, infrastructure preservation or areas that are experiencing exacerbated deterioration of the pavement according to our pavement materials engineers in other areas outside of this, in other areas in the state of Minnesota. As we think about these specific data, we also wanted to recognize that data plays an important part of developing the needs assessment report. As we look at the specific needs, we wanted to map out each of those truck volumes and locations. In the lower left-hand corner of this particular slide, we have shown a map that shows the area in MnDOT District 7. MnDOT District 7 has a wide variety of different truck volumes, and so weight enforcement is needed in the key areas where truck volumes are located. In addition to that, we didn't want to define specific locations that were not seen by a lot of trucks. We wanted to look to see, using data-driven process, whether or not individual trucks are being seen by multiple weigh station sites. To maximize our efficiency, we used the Streetlight data insight program to determine whether or not individual trucks are being seen by multiple weigh station sites. As you can see in the upper right-hand corner is a picture from the Streetlight Insight data software. Within our needs assessment report are individual information that help us understand what percent of individual trucks have passed by I-90 westbound going through Worthington, and then subsequently were seen at the Clark's Grove weigh station site on I-35 going northbound. If there is a high percentage, we would theoretically not want to invest in that additional site, or we could stretch our resources out in the future. So these will all be part of our future needs assessment report summary. Currently, we're in the process of developing our needs assessment report and finalizing that report as we begin to develop our draft weight investment plan. Which brings me to my next subject, which is outreach and input gathering. Outreach and input is a very vital part of developing a transportation plan in any type of system, and including the weight enforcement area. As part of that effort, we are here today learning about this plan through a public input webinar. We've also worked through regional meetings at each area of the state while at the MnDOT districts and the state patrol districts. As you can see in the right corner of the presentation are the individual state patrol districts that we have covered through regional meetings. All of the regional meetings are helpful in understanding input from state patrol as well as MnDOT district staff and local businesses as we move forward. We also plan to develop an open house once we've completed our draft investment plan to ensure that we are able to gain all of the outreach and input that we can. So that brings me to my next subject, which is we would like to develop a live survey with you here today. That live survey is using a Mentimeter system. And if you have a cell phone or another device, or if you can open another browser in your current computer website and enter the web URL www.menti.com and enter code 648902. We have a short interactive survey that we'd like to do with you live over the air right here, right now, and use that input as we develop the draft plan. So in a minute here, I'm going to transition over to the Menti software, and you will see the survey come live on your screen. So Menti.com is a very helpful software that helps us take live input and visualize that information and use it as we move forward on our various policies and plans. One of the things that we talk about are what are the biggest safety concerns for you as truck drivers as well as trucking companies. Are there areas, is that areas to rest? Do you need more truck parking locations? Are you concerned about overweight loads from other truckers? Is it the roadway conditions that are affecting your travel, such as congestion or the maintenance of the road itself? Is it other truck drivers or perhaps other single occupancy vehicles such as cars or trucks near you that are a safety concern? Is it the quality of the truck fleet or the equipment that you're using? Is it weather or other types of other concerns like tornadoes, rain, ice, hail? What types of safety concerns do you see that are the biggest issues? And I'll stop for just a moment to let everybody provide their opinion on this particular slide, and then we'll move on in just a minute here. So it looks like we've gotten a majority of our surveyors, our takers, and in just a minute, I will move on to the next question. So if you have an opinion, please enter it now, and we will definitely take into account all of this information. Just so I mentioned, this is also the survey that we sent out as part of our notice for this particular webinar. So you may recognize the questions, and if you've already taken the survey, please don't take it again. We're going to try and combine all the individual questions together to give us a better look at all of the input that we've received so far. So let's move on to the next question, which is, I wanted to show each of the state patrol districts in different regions of the state. State patrol districts are operational units which involve local state patrol staff that work throughout the state. As you can tell, the Metro District is Station 4370. The southeastern station is 4710. The South Central and Southwest area is 4720. There is a central group in 4740. There is a northwest group in 4770, as well as a north central group in 4760. So as we look in each of these areas, are there areas of the state that you see that there is a need for additional weight enforcement investment? Maybe you're a trucking company and you see other trucking companies that maybe aren't following the laws, or they're not following the rules, and we should be investing in that area. That's where you would maybe put that in the northeast or the northwest. You would indicate that here in this particular question. So I'm seeing one for the northeast corner of the state. As we think about it too, there are definitely different trends throughout the state. There's different agricultural products that occur throughout the state, as well as freight for medical supplies, things like wind turbines. You know, the state has a wide variety of different cargo freight, and as we think about that, that might be an area that we would invest for enforcement generally in the future. So I'm going to take a minute just to let everybody respond again, and then we'll move on to the next question. Okay, well, let's any last votes? We'll move on to the next question. So this question asks for you to rank the weight, safety, or technologies that you see as the needs. 1 being the lowest level of importance and 10 being the highest level of importance. So we have a wide range of different questions that within this particular question that we're asking for your feedback on. Are weigh stations important? Is pre-clearance important? Is truck parking important to you? Are weigh in motion systems important to you? Are roadway maintenance or truck technology is important? And where does that sit within your priorities? Are they high? Are they low? Where should we put those investments in the future? And don't be shy. You know, if roadway maintenance is your number one and you put that as your highest goal in terms of your perspective, then put that at a 10. This is just a group of particular investments that we may or may not include in the future, but it's helpful for us to know if roadway maintenance is a big issue, that might be an area that we need to invest in the future more. So I'll give it just another minute, and then we'll move on to the last question. So do you have any additional questions or comments? These are things that you've been wondering about this effort or about other issues that you've heard. This is very open-ended. We will have another opportunity where you can call in just a minute. If you want to voice your questions as well, I will do my best to answer them. I can't guarantee that I'm the expert, so keep that in mind as I ask these questions. They're trying to answer things related to our weight enforcement or investment plan. So I'm not seeing anything specific. I do have a few other questions that we received as part of our survey previously. One of the things that we've been asked is before is when and how long are we going to keep roads painted, and how do we make sure that those roads are painted, keeping them in good condition? And the answer to that question is that road paint is actually a separate investment. It's definitely something that we will consider as part of this effort, and keeping our maintenance engineers appraised of the needs throughout Minnesota for individual paint investments in the future. One of the other questions is that why are oversized loads not allowed on Fridays and Sundays? That on specific holidays and things of that nature. And the reason why is that we want to make sure that oversized loads are able to get from point A to B without running into major traffic. Major traffic is something that we experience particularly during major holidays, where folks are getting out and driving to their relatives, or they're driving to their cabin, or they're going to specific areas that we see unusual congestion that would impact both the oversized overweight load as well as the individual drivers that are going in that area. So with that, I'll wrap up our survey and we'll go back to our presentation in just a minute here. We have a few additional slides here, so stick with me. Our next steps are we're going to finish gathering input from all groups, from MnDOT staff, from State Patrol staff, businesses, and other groups, the general public. We're going to develop and finalize our needs assessment report this month in June, and we're going to start working on developing a draft plan starting in June. One of the things that we're also going to do is we're actually going to send out the draft plan for public review. There'll be a 30-day comment period, and we're targeting August to have that draft plan out for public review. It is possible that the planning process could go into September. We just need to determine where the level of input is kind of directing us. We have a interagency committee called CVIC that controls and provides strategic policies for our combined agencies, MnDOT, State Patrol, Department of Public Safety, the Federal Highway Administration, as well as the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. So this plan will actually go to that group for adoption and final approval. So now, looks like we just got one additional question. It's asking regarding what is your statutory authority for purchasing and using weigh and motion scales? Statutory authority for weigh and motion scales, specifically in relation to general operations of the transportation system, falls under the statutes for the Commissioner of Transportation. Specifically, I think it's Chapter 174. The weigh and motion systems aren't actually scales. They're not certified weights, so they're not used for enforcement. So if you drive over them, that is just a general indicator that we use to account for traffic. The State Patrol at some times uses the camera feeds from weight and motion systems that have a camera operating on them, and are able to determine in general whether a specific load is overweight or not overweight. And then they will use portable scales to identify a certified weight for enforcement. And that is under the statutory authority that's afforded to the State Patrol for weight and size enforcement. We can provide additional information further on in email format if you have additional questions. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for coming today. We will have a little bit of time here just to see if our phone system works for questions and answers. You can call 1-800-888-742-5095 and enter conference code 413-957-5648. And we ask that you please do only ask one question at a time, and we will try our best to provide you an answer. Generally, we're looking more specifically at the investment plan itself, not the individual laws or regulations. At this time, the weight enforcement investment plan is not proposing to make any changes to regulations that are currently adopted. It's primarily looking at investments and future expenses to continue the program into the future. So it doesn't look like we have any specific callers in. So with that, I will thank you for coming today. I appreciate your time and efforts. And if you have any additional comments or if you have specific input on the draft plan, please feel free to email us. I've listed my contact information on this slide as well. I am definitely able to respond to any issues or questions that you may have regarding the investment plan. Thank you very much.